Questions to the Cabinet members will now be taken until the 45 minutes continuous period for questions and answers has ended. Councillor Thomas.
Question number 12 to the Cabinet member.
I thank the Councillor for the, looks like 5 questions to me, masquerading as 1. But they are all connected. I have to say, Councillor Belton isn't going to like this, but this is another classic example of the challenges we face being absolutely defined by the catastrophic incompetence of the last Labour government, landing us banks. Who was in charge of regulating the banks? For 13 years. Yeah, tiny point. Yeah. And who was in charge of regulating them for 13 years? Yeah.
Councillor Cook.
I thought you said you were concerned about noise. To get to the point of the question, this is another very good example of when we're faced with the challenge that you lot created. We are looking at what we can afford, and we're calibrating the priorities, and we're making sure that the things that we absolutely have to deal with, we will deal with. And in particular, on B here, I cannot emphasise strongly enough that anybody who thinks they can get away with creating a persistent noise problem for their neighbours would be making a very big mistake, because we will have robust measures in place to make sure we can deal with that. And as his very full answer explains, there is still an extremely effective service in place, which is a frontline service which is being preserved.
First supplementary. Councillor Thomas.
I thank the Cabinet member for his answer. I'm sure that he would agree with me that this is an extremely important issue. I'm sure also that there are many members here who have dealt with residents whose life is made, frankly, a misery by perpetrators of noise nuisance. My concern is specifically about what will happen for those people where that nuisance is taking place on Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday nights. He refers in his answer to alternative arrangements being made where necessary. Could he actually elaborate on what alternative arrangements he has in mind in practical terms? What practical measures is the Council going to be proposing to take under the new system such that where noise nuisance is taking place and there is a need, for instance, to collect evidence so that a prosecution can be mounted, what is he going to do to make sure that we can still tell residents, yes, you can call someone out if it's happening, so that we can gather the evidence?
Councillor Cook.
Well, thank the Councillor for the supplementary question. I think the answer is actually here. There is a lot of information here, and there are 2 things really. The first is that if it's a one-off occasion, as with now, so no change, it will be dealt with the next day. But as the question here says very clearly, if there is a persistent problem, then we will change arrangements, put in place teams on an overtime basis if we need to do that, so that we will deal with any persistent problem. We will also be consulting very closely with the police. So residents shouldn't be concerned that that there's suddenly going to be a great proliferation of serious noise problems, because we will not allow that to happen. I should say, though, we must be absolutely frank, as Councillor Senior said in his response, we can't pretend that there isn't going to be some slight diminution of service here. That's inevitable. But what we've done here is prioritise it and make sure that the very, very serious cases are dealt with.
Supplementary. Councillor Carpenter.
Second supplementary. Can we have a copper-bottom guarantee that these measures will be made in Monday, Tuesday and Wednesday for repeat occasions?
Councillor Cook.
I thank the Council. I think the written answer from what I've just said is pretty clear. I'm not sure I can really add much to it.
Councillor Locke.
Question number 13 to the Cabinet member.
Well, I thank the Councillor for this question. Yes, it's quite an extraordinary event, as the question says, about 20 vehicles onto Tooting Common, and an absolutely outrageous industrial scale fly tip of about 40 tonnes which cost us £10,000 to move. Absolutely outrageous. We did manage to move them very quickly. This particular group have been travelling all over southwest London, and I'm pleased to say that everywhere else they've stopped, they've managed to linger a little bit longer, so hopefully they will conclude that Wandsworth isn't the place to do this sort of thing. We are holding a meeting here with our neighbouring boroughs and all the officers who deal with this sort of thing next month to make sure that if there is anything else we can do, then we will do it to make their lives very uncomfortable.
Supplemental? Thank you, Madam Mayor. I thank the Cabinet Member for his response, and I wonder if you could also pass on my thanks to the hard work of the officers and staff who helped deal with this incident. Can you remind the Council what provisions are currently made by the Borough to support travellers in Wandsworth?
Councillor Cook.
I thank the Council for the supplementary question. This is very important. We have a designated site, as we're obliged to do, and we have done for many years. We fulfil our obligations on that front, absolutely. I think it's important to know, I think it's mentioned in the written answer, I'm not entirely convinced that this group were all travellers. There's quite a lot of evidence that some of them have permanent addresses not too far from here. Milton Keynes and Croydon have been mentioned, and so if that is the case, then what these people were doing was just simply a criminal activity, collecting rubbish and then dumping it on our commons, and it really is not a traveller issue at all. But on the subject of travellers, we take our obligations there seriously, and we have all the appropriate arrangements in place.
Second supplementary. Now move to item 14. Councillor Speck.
Yeah.
Madam Mayor, with your permission, if I could answer questions 14 and 15 together, I would happily do so, provided the questioners are happy with that approach.
You agreed.
I'm just... It's thrown me now. Question 14 to the Cabinet Member.
Councillor Madden.
I thank the councillor for her question. And I would like to start by saying that in response to Councillor Usher's question, question 15, when she asks, had I read the recent worrying report? Not only have I read it, I have a copy here if anybody would like to join me in reading it. It is an enlightening document. The bottom line is that Wandsworth Council does not commission 15-minute care appointments. The minimum appointment commissioned is for 30 minutes. This was a conscious decision made by the Council when procuring the current framework agreement, recognising that 15-minute visits are unlikely to be sufficient to meet the assessed care needs of service users adequately. The decision was reinforced by the qualitative changes to the service specification for home care services, and I have some examples which I can share if the questioners would like more information. The remainder of the points raised by the questioners are contained in the written answer we have in front of you. But going back to the first part of Councillor Speck's question, I and my colleagues also regularly visit places of all types frequented by the elderly and vulnerable, the people who are receiving care from this council. And yet I, and I'm sure they are similarly positioned, have not received any concerns of the type suggested by Councillor Speck. So I would ask her if she could let me have full details of the people who were concerned, and I will ensure that either I contact them or the department try and deal with their concerns. Thank you, Madam Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Madden. Councillor Speck.
Supplementary. I mean, I'm pleased to see that we do only commission the minimum appointment of 30 minutes. I just wanted to check that this doesn't include travel time and how we actually monitor it. I wasn't quite sure how this electronic care monitoring worked and whether the monitoring is just on time.
One supplementary question, not 5.
And whether we actually monitor the quality, because the worry is that the time is rushing in and out.
Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Fair.
Madam Mayor, I thank the councillor for her supplementary question. I was also concerned about the travelling time, which was suggested in the document was significant, and I'm pleasantly reassured that all the commissioning in a particular area is dealt with under one commission, which means that if there is any travelling time between the places, the people who need the care, that it's going to be less than a few hundred yards, and therefore it's not going to be very time. If it does exist, but it's not going to be time consuming. But the answer is no, travelling time is not part of the 30 minutes. They're monitored by, they make contact with the department when they arrive, they make contact when they leave. Inevitably, there will be occasions when they're able to complete the care tasks in less than 30 minutes. Sometimes it takes more. There are occasions, as it says in the written answer, when the person receiving the visit might be expecting a visitor and they ask the carer to come back at a later time. But as it says, of the 4,400 calls per month, about 2.7 will be for a period of under 30 minutes.
Thank you, Councillor Madden. Would there be a second supplementary? Oh, that's fully answered. We're now moving to item 16. Leonie Cooper, perhaps. Billy?
I'll ask question 16 on behalf of Councillor Cooper.
I thank Councillor Randall, Councillor Cooper for the question, I guess. I'm not sure where Councillor Cooper's coming from on this one. She seems to have got on the wrong end of the stick about what the surplus is, because there isn't one. So I don't know whether you know, Councillor Randall, whether you can provide an explanation in the supplementary. That would be greatly helpful.
Councillor Randall.
Yes, thank you. I think what Councillor Cooper was probably referring to was the surplus on the parking fund, the surplus that comes from parking permits, visitors permits, fixed penalty notices and things like that. And I think it is the case that you will find some surplus money there in which you could extend your pothole and pavement repair programme, and would you consider doing that?
Councillor King.
Actually, there isn't really what I would classify as a surplus, in that there is money spare in that pot, because that money is already allocated. The biggest single contributor for that is the Freedom Pass, which costs something between 12 and 14 million pounds a year. It also provides funding for transport for adults and children with disabilities and special needs, and those are things that obviously are critical and very important to our residents and are not something that is surplus.
Second supplementaries. Councillor Locker.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Does the Cabinet Member agree with me that it's precisely because we have been careful managing our budgets here in Wandsworth that we are able to make the additional investment in road repairs this year to tackle the problems caused by a succession of very harsh winters?
I thank my colleague for the question. I think it's a very important point about this council. For all the time that the Conservatives have been in control of Wandsworth Council, the finances have been run extremely well. It's shown up in wherever you look within the council, it's shown up throughout, whether it's the way that we run our HRA, we talked about the balances that we have there, where we look at our pension fund, and I sit on the pension committee, and how well funded that is in compared to almost every other authority in the country, and it's also about how we manage the general fund, which is why we have the lowest average council tax in the country.
Thank you. Councillor Sutter.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Question 17 to the Cabinet Member for Education and Children's Services.
I thank the Councillor for the question. The reply is pretty detailed, and I think councillors across the chamber can be delighted with the response, because in fact we have a really superb record on the raising participation age. We were a pilot borough, but we have probably shown the rest of the country how to do it.
Councillor Sutters.
Supplementary, thank you. Could the Cabinet Member confirm that in fact it's even better than shown in this answer, because we have continued to work with the 9% who were not placed in July, so that many more have found placements through targeted initiatives?
Councillor Tracy.
Yes, it is very interesting that in fact we've been in contact with every single one of the youngsters that in July there were 77 that we thought, or the schools had told us, were in danger of perhaps not continuing their education. Every one of those has been targeted personally. and the success rate, we're down to about 20 youngsters that really are not too keen to continue their education, and we are still tempting them with apprenticeships and the like. But it has been a real success story, and you have to bear in mind this was in the year when the money for training and for forgotten what the word is, careers advice and what have you was transferred from the authority to schools. And I know
Second supplementary. I move now to item 18. Councillor Belton.
Question 18 of the Cabinet Member.
Madam Mayor, I'd like to thank Councillor Belton for his question. I have indeed read the newspaper report that he referred to, and I'm pleased to say that there have been no such cases in Wandsworth, but in the event that we did have any, obviously they will be treated on their merits.
Councillor Belton.
Would the Chairman accept that that conflicts slightly with what I understand from one of my constituents who is on has a dialysis machine and would have, I would think, an arguable case? Unfortunately, I've only picked up the answer here and I don't have the details of the case to mind, but if I invite them, I'm sure Councillor Ellis and the Department will be interested to see it.
I'd like to thank Councillor Belton for his supplementary. Yes, indeed, I am not aware of the case to which he has referred. If he would be kind enough to send it to me, I will ensure that it is investigated.
Is there a second supplementary?
Yes.
Councillor Nicholl.
Perhaps the Cabinet Member might be able to inform me how many families have been able to move out of overcrowded accommodation since the changes to the housing benefit have been introduced?
Councillor Ellis.
It has been enormously successful, and obviously when we get people coming to our surgeries, they rarely come to complain that they've got too much accommodation. People normally come to complain that they're overcrowded and wish to move. And I believe now we're up to about 100 families have been able to move to more suitable accommodation, which I think is something that I'm sure we would all approve of.
Thank you, Councillor Ellis. Item 19, Councillor Vanessa Graham.
Thank you, Councillor. It was a difficult one for the Labour councillor. I have some sympathy, though, because there were some design issues which I think can be dealt with at condition. Difficult, though, to understand the Labour position more generally. They want it to work it both ways. The one hand arguing against schemes which have less than policy compliant affordable housing and are arguing for refusal, but then when there is 100% affordable housing on a scheme, arguing that that should be refused too. And therefore it's difficult not to conclude that their entire position on affordable housing is driven by naked political opportunity.
Supplementary. First supplementary, Councillor Graham.
As I say, I mean, there were some design material issues, had some sympathy with Councillor Randall. Hopefully we can address those. It would have been a great shame, though, to refuse a 100% affordable housing scheme, no matter what part of the borough it would have been in.
Second
supplementary, Councillor.
Thank you. On the other item, can I assure the Chairman that I welcome all affordable housing? I was simply registering my view that on that particular site in Nine Elms, the council planned and press released a very innovative sort of rent-to-save to buy model that would have given local people a step on the housing ladder. You can't vote yes, but, so I was just registering my view that that would have been better. Thank you.
Points of personal explanation. Oh, sorry.
Could Councillor answer the question? Or is that part of the supplementary? That wasn't a question.
I don't think there's a response required to Councillor Hogg there. I think you're just making a statement, and I don't need a response.
Okay, thank you.
Point of personal explanation.
You want a personal explanation?
I do, as I was mentioned
Yep.
by name
Accepted.
in the answer. We are always told at Planning Applications Committee that each application is taken on its own merit, and we are not whipped at Planning Applications Committee. And I take very seriously my role of representing the residents of Graveney Ward, as do other members of the Planning Applications Committee. And I think it's unfair to imply that I am not in favour of affordable housing because I chose to listen to the concerns of the residents in Otterburn and Stella Street, the roads around Otterburn and Stella, and take on their points of view. And Councillor Cuff is right. It was a difficult decision, and I also felt that this housing was being put in a very noisy place with a lot of family accommodation on a very busy road. So I had heartfelt concerns, but not concerns with the issue of providing affordable housing per se.
Thank you. Would you wish to reply? Thank you very much. Question 20, Councillor Fairbrother.
Question 20 to the Cabinet Member for Strategic Planning and Transport.
I thank Councillor Fairbrother for this question. It's clear to me that we are clearly not doing enough on communication on all the things that are going down in the borough, because obviously the councillor would be well informed about what the council was doing in most cases, and obviously is not informed about the huge improvements that are going on throughout the borough on our pavements, and therefore it's clear to me that I will ask the relevant officers to include more information in Brightside and on further press releases providing further information, because so that make sure that residents hear about all the great things that this council is doing on pavements.
That's up. Councillor Fairbrother.
I thank the Cabinet Member for his answer. I do drive around the ward and other wards, and I note that his response says the dangerous pavements have been duly repaired, which is good news. I certainly agree with that. But what doesn't seem to be happening is what I would call quite serious defects. They have been lying for many, many months, if sometimes nearly a year. One resident rang up the town hall and they were told, well, don't worry, we'll start this in November. Is that an accurate statement? What's going to happen? Because I think there are some quite serious defects that do need tackling. They can't all be done at once, I appreciate.
Councillor King.
Whenever a defect is reported to the council, we assess the seriousness of that defect. Anything that is dangerous or a critical defect will get repaired now, and obviously we're seeing significant improvements across the borough. If the council would like to write to me with particular examples, I'd be more than happy to get officers to have a look at them.
Is there a second supplementary? Right, that concludes questions.